When you think of sport bikes, you probably think of motorcycles from the likes of Ducati and Suzuki and Honda. But if you think of truly crazy sport bikes through history, the kind of hair-raising, outlandish machines made to put fear in your mother's heart, no other name comes to mind quite like Kawasaki. From the original two-stroke H2 Mach 4, rightly nicknamed the Widowmaker, to the Ninja GPZ 900, to the bike we're looking at today. From the very beginning, Kawasaki had a slightly different focus than the rest of the big four Japanese manufacturers. Once they got going with larger displacement models, it's not that the other companies didn't make sport-going bikes, it's that Kawasaki was unique in how they approached them. For example, when Honda was busy cooking up a sort of ultimate sporteur, the 4-cylinder, 4-stroke CB750, Kawasaki, well, they were making the same thing, but it became clear that Honda was going to beat everyone to the punch, so they took a hard turn and decided to take a different approach to make what would be the craziest, fastest motorcycle in the world, a manic, large displacement 3-cylinder 2-stroke. Originally 500 cc's and known as the H1 Mach 2, this bike was a destroyer of quarter miles, but it lacked the proper frame and suspension to make it anything but terrifying, so they decided to make it faster and more powerful. That is the H2 Mach 4, a 750cc two-stroke, and even with the improvements made to the frame, it was still too much engine for its own good. The kind of motorcycle that no sane manufacturer would make. And this is where Kawasaki would begin to make a name for themselves as kind of a not totally sane motorcycle manufacturer. And it's also where the H2 name was born, and at this time, the track version of the H2 would be known as the H2R. As we'll see, H2 would come to define Kawasaki's boldest attempts at making unique and special kinds of sport bikes that really do push the boundaries of what's possible for motorcycles. A name that evokes the idea of thinking outside the box. Through the 80s and 90s, Kawasaki would be entrenched in the horsepower wars alongside the other Japanese manufacturers, primarily with their Ninja series. But the Suzuki Hayabusa would put an end to all that madness, taking the crown for ultimate superbike and bringing about the gentleman's agreement where the Japanese manufacturers essentially decided to basically chill the heck out. I mean, somebody's going to get hurt, right? And the Hayabusa remained kind of the king of the hill for superbikes. That is until Kawasaki decided to bring back the H2 and H2R name for an all-new motorcycle, one that many would dub the First Hyperbike. Making the fastest motorcycle in the world is no easy feat, and as with the original H2, the only way to accomplish it is to start with a special power plant. In this case, a supercharged power plant. Now, supercharging a production motorcycle wasn't entirely new at this point. In fact, the golden age of supercharged motorcycles dates all the way back to the 20s and 30s, primarily with BMW and their WR750 race bike. BMW's supercharged flat twins would even win the Isle of Man and multiple land speed records. Brough Superior and many of the companies vying for land speed records were using big, ridiculous superchargers, but bans on superchargers in racing, and ultimately the simple fact that naturally aspirated engines were more reliable, simpler, cheaper, and just easier to maintain, and thanks to other advancements, they basically became obsolete. In many ways, manufacturers had to relearn this lesson with turbochargers and the turbo craze of the 80s, and Kawasaki is included in that. The benefits of forced induction on motorcycles just didn't really outweigh the problems. But the team heading up the new H2R program believed that with the right engine, one designed from the ground up with supercharging specifically in mind, that they could bring this technology back to the motorcycle world. Now, both superchargers and turbochargers work to smash extra air into the engine, but a supercharger is run off the engine's crankshaft, whereas a turbo runs off the engine's exhaust gas. Turbos are ideal for ultimate maximum power, but superchargers are quite a bit smoother. They don't have as much of that thing we'd call turbo lag. One could argue that turbocharging would be more in line with the manic nature of the original H2 with its large displacement two-stroke, but I think the supercharger made more sense. Regardless, motorcycles present specific problems for either application. It's not like a car where there's all sorts of room for extra bits, and with this being a two-wheeled vehicle, weight distribution and stability is so important, Kawasaki wasn't just going to make something like, say, the Dodge Tomahawk. I mean, that's the epitome of the difference between car and motorcycle development. That thing may make like 500 horsepower, but it literally can't turn, and it's anything but stable, even with four wheels. Kawasaki wasn't interested in that, so weight had to be brought down wherever possible, and making a 1000cc engine would be better than, say, a 14 or 1500cc engine. Now, finding information about the development of the H2R and H2 is pretty difficult. There's this great document from Kawasaki engineers that goes into some detail, but mainly it goes over Kawasaki's goals with the project, and it kind of reads like a big memo. So I want to give a big shout out to the channel The Illustrator and his video on the H2. It's really good. He points out that Kawasaki actually had quite a bit of experience developing superchargers for their four-cylinder jet ski, the 250X. That was a 1500cc supercharged monster using a Roots-type supercharger making some 250 horsepower. Dating all the way back to 2011, some 3 years before the H2 would be unveiled, Kawasaki was filing patents for a supercharger for a four-cylinder motorcycle engine, and so the hype began at this point, with many speculating a successor to the ZX-14R, but oh boy, they had no clue what Kawasaki was cooking up. In 2013, they unveiled the supercharged engine that would later go into the H2, and this would be the first time a motorcycle manufacturer actually built their own supercharger, capable in this case, with that engine, of making over 300 horsepower. And in that sense, this was meant to be a kind of modern H2, providing unbelievable acceleration. Achieving this in the modern world with current emissions, it's really incredible. The development of this specifically motorcycle purpose supercharger was a massive part of the work for the team. The supercharger used in the Kawasaki Ninja H2 is a centrifugal type, which means it uses centrifugal force to compress the incoming air. It consists of a series of impellers that spin at incredibly high speeds, drawing in air and forcing it into the engine under high pressure. These impeller blades on the Ninja are unbelievably thin, some 1 millimeter. The impeller is a critical component of the supercharger. It's designed to spin at extremely high RPMs, in this case with the H2, 120,000 revolutions per minute. The impeller blades are precisely shaped to maximize airflow and pressure while minimizing turbulence and heat buildup. One of the key advantages of the centrifugal supercharger used in the H2 is its compact size and its relatively lightweight compared to other types of superchargers and turbos. This helps in maintaining the bike's overall balance and handling characteristics. Kawasaki leveraged its extensive experience and expertise in various engineering fields, including aerospace and turbine technology, to develop the supercharger. And because they made it and they made the engine with this supercharger in mind, it was just perfectly tailored to what they wanted. The design and manufacturing techniques used in the supercharger were heavily influenced by Kawasaki's aerospace division. One of the main challenges in developing the supercharger was balancing the need for high performance, but also long-term reliability. And this was achieved through the use of high-quality materials, advanced manufacturing techniques, and rigorous testing protocol. The engine and the supercharger is a feat in and of itself, but what's perhaps even more fascinating is the way in which Kawasaki made the H2R still a usable, viable motorcycle. In the decades preceding this bike's unveil, the fastest motorcycles in the world became differentiated from regular sport bikes. So the Kawasaki ZX-14R and the Hayabusa are good examples of this. As the superbike and sport bike or leader bike classes kind of separated during the horsepower races of the 80s and 90s, with larger, upwards of 1500cc displacement motorcycles becoming sort of pigs. Yes, they were fast in a straight line, but that's about it. These motorcycles, they're heavy, they're not exactly known for their handling, but with the H2R and then the H2, Kawasaki wanted nothing to do with that formula. They set out to rewrite the script, once again making the fastest motorcycle in the world that was also still a traditional motorcycle, not a super thick sort of sport tourer. The H2R project, known as Project 8200, was headed up by Satoaki Ichi, and it's important to understand that Kawasaki is not just a motorcycle manufacturer. In fact, it's not even primarily a motorcycle manufacturer, and that's part of what's always helped them stand out from the other Japanese companies, and the H2R really really shows this. Ichi decided to go to the other branches of Kawasaki, which include everything from aerospace to precision engineering. Basically, Kawasaki had all the resources necessary to make a truly groundbreaking motorcycle. Now, the first step towards more speed had to do with the engine. They didn't just make the engine lightweight and compact. Every single aspect of the motorcycle was engineered for weight savings while keeping incredible stability at high speeds. So to pair to this incredibly powerful engine, they made a lightweight but rigid steel trellis frame. The ZX-14 had a similar frame, but it was made of aluminum. For the H2, they specifically developed this frame. This was a way to balance the stability necessary for incredibly high speeds, but also maintain some level of agility close to that of a traditional leader bike. One of the problems with a motorcycle versus a car is that once you surpass about 180 miles per hour, the bike wants to basically lift off the ground. I mean, cars want to do that too, but not to the same extent. Especially the front wheel on a motorcycle wants to lift off the ground. So Kawasaki created specifically designed winglets with various slots and edges. No, those aren't made to make the bike look more intimidating, though they do accomplish that. Rather, these were designed with aircraft aerodynamics in mind, and Kawasaki even used specific computer aerospace systems to basically optimize the front end of the H2, not only for aerodynamics and reducing lift, but also for effective engine cooling. Once you dig in, you realize why this project took years to really complete. On the one hand, the H2 and H2R were the ultimate experiment in function leading to form, but they did know that the bike would have to have a sort of presence. So Kawasaki set out to give the H2 a level of craftsmanship that's rarely seen on a mass-produced motorcycle, from using specific lighting in their manufacturing and assembly process so that they can easily detect problems, to the way every piece of the frame is welded together specifically for effectiveness, but also for basically beauty. Kawasaki built specific robot welding machines just for this motorcycle, and for the first time ever, durable silver mirror paint was used for external parts. This specific paint was developed by Kawasaki to make it incredibly resilient and able to recover from scratches. Just go research silver mirror paint for a bit, it's pretty amazing. And the end result is a motorcycle that is so unique. I've always felt that the H2 is one of the last motorcycles that should be on a poster in a kid's room somewhere. It's so aggressive, almost scary looking. In that video by the illustrator, he talks about how head-on the bike kind of looks like a mythical creature or a dragon, which I just think is so cool. You know, the Cybertruck looks like a movie prop, but in a bad way. This looks like a movie prop, but in the best way possible, because the form is all flowing out of the function, which is namely speed and performance. Now, by 2014, there was quite a bit of buzz about what exactly Kawasaki had been cooking up. They launched a series of teaser videos and images that hinted at a revolutionary new motorcycle. These teasers were strategically released over several months, gradually revealing more details about the bike, while keeping the full specifications and design kind of a mystery. Each teaser focused on different aspects of the bike, such as the sound of the engine, glimpses of the design, and close-ups of specific components. Kawasaki maintained a high level of secrecy around the details of the Ninja H2R, and this led to a lot of speculation and rumors in the press and among motorcycle enthusiasts. And the lack of concrete information really fueled the excitement and made the eventual reveal just really highly anticipated. Kawasaki chose the prestigious Intermont Motorcycle Show in Cologne, Germany, for the official unveiling of the Ninja H2R in October of 2014. The unveiling was marked by a dramatic presentation that included a multimedia display with videos showcasing the development process and the performance capabilities of the H2R. The presentation highlighted the bike's technical specifications, the design philosophy, and the expertise that went into its creation. The H2R was displayed in a special section of the Kawasaki booth where attendees could get a close-up look at this motorcycle. And the striking design, combined with the knowledge that it was one of the most powerful motorcycles ever produced, really created a huge buzz at the show, making the H2 probably the most talked about motorcycle of the year. The H2R was unveiled first, but then the street legal H2 shortly after, which was smart. Developing the track-only H2R first meant that a few simple tweaks could be done to bring down the power and make the bike street ready. Now, the H2R holds multiple world records, but perhaps the coolest took place in 2016, where Turkish professional motorcycle racer Kenan Sofuglu set a new world record for the highest speed on a production motorcycle at Turkey's Osman Gazi Bridge. He achieved a top speed of 400 kilometers per hour or 249 miles per hour. And this record was particularly notable as it was achieved on a public roadway, albeit, one that was closed for the attempt. Now, I think to really understand this motorcycle and its impact, you need to go beyond the motorcycle world to the car world and look at a similar machine. At the turn of the century, the reigning king of the supercar world was the McLaren F1, much like the Suzuki Hayabusa was the king of the superbike world, or at least the king of the top speed machines. Supercars and superbikes kind of mean different things, but that's okay. At that point, there was sort of a gentleman's agreement to stop making motorcycles with higher and higher top speeds, but that didn't take place in the car world. They just kept going, and they kept pursuing higher top speeds and just more horsepower overall, and the quad-turbo Bugatti Veyron of 2005 with its W16 engine making over 1,000 horsepower would really take the supercar world to another level. In many ways, it was the first hypercar. We kind of needed a new term to describe this machine because it was just so far beyond the previous cars in this class, both in terms of tech and specs. And because it was just kind of a different kind of car altogether. And if that gentleman's agreement hadn't happened, the motorcycle world would have probably trended in the same direction. Cars like the Veyron and Chiron, they're not really traditional track cars or even traditional sports cars, much like the Kawasaki H2 isn't. It's a motorcycle crafted for top speed, and many of the ways in which it was engineered for stability at incredible speeds and the fact that it uses specifically designed forced induction, it's just very similar to the Veyron in its day, and it had a very similar impact. Now, as much as the Ninja H2 is a marvel of modern technology and engineering, the approach to designing and developing it was very much old school. The attention to detail and craftsmanship, the desire to make something truly unique, this idea of building a motorcycle from the ground up. I can't think of another motorcycle in recent years that has had this kind of treatment, especially from one of the big four Japanese companies. And it's because of this that the H2 kind of stands out. It has a sort of aura. So many manufacturers are just worried about how they can make this one motorcycle, let's say it's a sport bike, how they can also make it be an adventure bike and also a street fighter and also a retro bike. Meanwhile, Kawasaki's out here casually making robots specifically for welding one motorcycle frame and entirely separate assembly lines and new types of paint, all for one bike. The H2 was not just another motorcycle made to share parts with a bunch of other motorcycles. This bike was built from the ground up for one purpose, and that really does, in my opinion, make it special. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Make sure to ride safe, especially if you're on an H2 or, a stretched turbo Busa or whatever you're riding. Take it easy, and we'll see you in the next one.